Oh, come on, Carol. Now we want to get you talking about everybody.
No.
So Billy, I'll sign on. Throw a picture on camera.
No. Johnny says he's gonna sign on and put my picture on there.
Go for it, Johnny.
Hey, where's his picture? He needs to put his on there too.
Well,
Yeah.
if he does me, I'm gonna do him. So,
There you
Go
go.
for it. Go for it, Johnny.
and I'm gonna do it below, so he has like 4 chins. Hey, Austin and Elizabeth.
Hey, Miss Carol.
That sounded exciting.
Well, she's in Bible class right now. She's got a friend of mine that does a Bible class. So she's about halfway through that one. So she's
Oh, well,
interested
cool.
in what's going on in Florida. So
Oh, I gotcha.
now you
Hey,
can,
kids.
she said hi.
Hey,
Austin,
kids.
Austin, come tell Miss Nancy hi. She didn't finish. Are you gonna come tell her hi?
Hey, buddy.
Say hi.
How
Get,
are you?
where'd Nancy go? She's right there.
I'm here.
Hey, man. Hey, Mr. Joe.
All right, give me just a second. I'm making sure everything's live where it needs to, and then we'll be starting class momentarily. All right, there we are there. That's one.
Paula, where are you guys?
We are in Louisville, Kentucky. We are heading to Ohio, where my dad is at on Friday. But we're with my brother right now.
One of her brothers.
Yeah, one of my brothers. That's right. My older
Okay.
One of her 3 brothers.
Okay.
But I'm interested in the time in Florida Bible
Okay.
class.
Yeah, Florida Bible class. Yep.
Okay.
All right, I think we're shared everywhere, and everybody's that's here gonna be here. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. I think everybody's what they need to be. You remember? We'll go ahead and get started. Maybe. I got there. Let me go ahead and put this on the screen. All right. So we're in Genesis 46. You remember last week we got into Genesis 45 where Joseph revealed himself to his brothers. Then he told the brothers to bring their father back, to go get him and bring him back to them so they would be able to live with him in the land of Goshen. And that's sort of where we're going to pick up this evening is Joseph and Jacob and all beginning their journey. So on this here. So we pick up here in Genesis 46. We start back in verse 1, where it says, So Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. So what we see here is that Israel, again, is very interesting that up till this point, he had been called Jacob. Now he's being called Israel again. We talked about that at the end of the last chapter, that the writer is going to refer to him as Israel fairly regularly from here on out, because he's taking on that role that God has established for him to be the leader of his people to become that great nation. And so we notice this, he comes first to the place of Beersheba. We've read about Beersheba before. Beersheba is a place that Abraham visited, a place that Isaac had lived. This is the place where Isaac had dealt with the issues with the herdsmen. You remember his herdsmen and the Philistine herdsmen had arguments over who had rights to wells. And therefore, they argued, and Isaac kept moving and digging a new well. He always found water every time he built. And so this is that place. Now, what's interesting about Beersheba is in the last, on the edge, the fringe of the promised land. Jacob is at that edge of going out of Canaan into another land. And this is the further south we've ever seen Jacob up to this point. Remember, Jacob went north when he went to his uncle to get his wives, and he never came this far south. Now, what we see is that as he comes to Beersheba, this again is a very key and valuable place. Jacob comes and offers sacrifices to God. And again, you know, God is referred to as the God of his father Isaac, meaning that, again, signifying that he's worshiping, serving the same God that his father had. There's no significance there that it's called the God of Isaac, not the God of Jacob. This is just a way to signify and to show that this is the same God, that this is not a new God he's chosen or turned to in worshiping. And so he goes, he offers these sacrifices to God. And there's a little bit of a question, a hesitation here, I think, among Jacob's part. And I think it's what leads to verse 2, is because earlier in the Genesis narrative, we'll notice that Jacob debated about going to Egypt at a time earlier than this to go because of a famine or some other event. I forget exactly what it is. But God told Jacob, do not go to Egypt. And so here Jacob is on this border trying to figure out what to do, because his son Joseph is saying, come to Egypt, come see me. But God has told him, you stay in the promised land. You don't go anywhere else from where I've told you to go. And so I think that's the reason for what happens in verse 2 and following, is that God comes to Jacob. And God comes to Jacob or Israel in the nights, visions of the night, in his dreams. He comes and gives him visions, those visions to be able to see what God wants him to do. And it's very interesting that God does this speech with Jacob that he's done with, or this calling with Jacob, as he's done with many Bible characters, where he says, Jacob, Jacob. And this is the same calling he gave Isaac. One time he spoke to Isaac this way, saying, Isaac, Isaac, I believe. I know he did this for Abraham, where he says, Abraham, Abraham. The other interesting thing about this God speaking to Israel is that this is the last time we have God speaking in the book of Genesis. This is the last time that God will speak. And what's interesting is that in the biblical narrative, the next time God speaks, he opens up with very similar words. Instead of Jacob, Jacob, it's in the beginning of the book of Exodus, and he says Moses, Moses. And so there's going to be about a 400-year period where we have no record of God speaking to his people here while they're in the land of Egypt. But we'll get there a little later. But he calls out to Jacob. He calls him Jacob, Jacob. And then he says, here I am. This is a typical response. You'll see this throughout the Old Testament and even the New Testament. When God calls, that was a response of here I am. It's almost that call almost of a servant to his master. When the servant is called to do something, asked to do something, he says, here I am. I'm ready to serve you. And that's sort of the idea we'll see. We see this in 1 Samuel with Samuel, when he wakes up in the middle of the night and he thinks that the priest Eli has been calling him. And you remember that Eli tells him the third time that Samuel says he hears Samuel, Samuel in the night. He tells him, respond, here am I, or here I am, your servant, ready to do your will. And so this was the typical response that people would give to God. So let's see what God tells Jacob. Verse 3, then he said, this is God, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you into Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. And Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. So God tells him that I'm God. I am the God of your father. And again, he's again acknowledging that God is acknowledging Jacob, that he's the same God that's been with Jacob before. He's a God that was with Jacob when he went to Padan Aram, when he went to Laban, the same God who's with him when he came back and he came into this promised land, received all these blessings. He says, I'm the God of your father. And then again, he says, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. So again, that makes me see and understand that Jacob was probably hesitant about this trip. And again, this is one other thing about this trip is Jacob and his family not just making a trip to go down here for a few minutes, for just a short time, but God is going to make this trip where he will be go down there forever. He's going to go down and not come back up. And so you notice there in verse 3 where God says, for there I'll make you into a great nation. God is telling Jacob that even though you're going to Egypt, I will be with you in Egypt, where before there was the command, if you go down to Egypt, I'm not going to bless you. If you go down to Egypt, I'm not going to give you what you're desiring. And then in verse 4, he says, I myself will go down with you. And again, this is something that goes against the grain of the pagan gods and against the typical thinking of God and gods in that old time, was that gods were only the gods of certain areas. If you had a god, that he was only effective in one area. He was only effective where you live. But God here says that I'm going down to Egypt. I'll go to a foreign nation with you. I'll go down there with you. Then again, he says, I'll also bring you up. And again, this is a promise not to Jacob personally, could be personally, and he'll bring him back to be buried, but also the promise that he'll bring his nation out of Egypt sometime in the future, in that time of the future that's going to come. So this is what we see here of what Jacob is doing. Now, you'll notice the other thing about this, there's some comforting words here where Jacob Jacob is told very comforting words when the very last line here, in Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. This picture is thought to be this line is thought to be a reference to a cultural thing that they would do. And that was that when a patriarch, a father of a family died, the oldest son, the closest relative, the favorite son would go to that body when it was dead and would literally take his hands and close the eyelids. So some people may have done this, or we've seen movies where this is done when someone dies and someone has to close the eyes. This is the promise that God is giving Jacob, is that if you go down to Egypt, not only will you die, will you see your son Joseph, but Joseph will be with you when you die. That Joseph will be there. And so this gives Jacob great comfort to know that Joseph will take care of him. And so we see from there in verse 5, then Jacob set out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, their little ones and their wives, and the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. So here we see this promise of God that he is, or Jacob makes this decision, that he's going out from Beersheba. And again, this is Jacob loading everything he has up in the wagons going. This is repeated a couple times in this narrative to let us know that Jacob is not like me and Paula are. You know, we load up a few things in our truck, come to Kentucky for a week or two, then we're going to go back. Jacob's not planning a trip to come back. He didn't leave anybody in the homestead. He didn't leave a certain part of his family behind for when they made the return trip back. No, they gathered everybody together and they all took off together. And so that's this idea that the sons were there, the father was there, the grandsons were there, their wives were there. They had everything that Pharaoh sent to them, and they were traveling down to Beersheba. And so this is where we see Jacob and his family headed. And you notice again, this emphasis in verse 6, they also took their livestock, their goods, which they had gained in the land of Canaan, and they came to Egypt. Jacob and all of his offspring with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, and his daughters and his sons' daughters, all his offspring he brought with him to Egypt. So again, there's this emphasis that it's not just a family. They took everything. They didn't leave anything behind. There's nothing left for them to return to. They were dedicating themselves to this trip. And so again, Jacob, we get this emphasis, the end of verse 6, Jacob and all of his offspring. Then we look at verse 7, he lists out that offspring, his sons, his sons' sons, his daughters, and his sons' daughters. Now, one thing that may be interesting to us is the idea of the word daughters. Because as far as the Genesis narrative is concerned, we only hear of one daughter of Jacob, and that's Dinah. Now, this is not unusual to use the plural to echo from the previous line, where he wouldn't say some historical writers, would say his sons and daughters, although he may have just had one son or one daughter. They wouldn't write typically his sons and daughter or his son and daughters. They like that parallel of the same words being the same. So that may be the reason here for the Genesis writer using daughters as plural. The other thing is he may have had daughters we don't know about. Or thirdly, he could be considering, the author could be considering daughters to include daughter-in-laws. This would have been the ones who married his sons, because we're taught about the sons and their wives. And they very well could have been called daughters in other circumstances as well. So Jacob does this again. Notice the end of verse 7, all that tied together is this, that all of his offspring Jacob brought with him to Egypt. Jacob brought everybody he had, everyone who was a part of his house. They all made this journey down to Egypt with him, and they all made this journey as one unit. There was no staying back in Canaan for somebody to come back at a later time. Now we get to the interesting part of this section. We'll try to go through this as quickly as possible. I'll highlight a few names here and there to notice, but this is just going to be a brief overview. Verse 8, now these are the names of the descendants of Israel, and I want to tell you, I'm not going to do these names justice. I'll do the best I can, but he's going to list all the names of Jacob, and he's going to list them by their mother. You'll notice these are all the names of the descendants of Israel who came to Egypt, Jacob and his sons. We begin with Reuben. Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and his son, and the sons of Reuben, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon, Jemiel, Jamim, Ohad, Jakin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. So here we see these sons of Jacob have sons themselves. Again, you notice that Reuben has 4 sons. Simeon has 5 sons, and one of those seems to be maybe by another. They indicate he had 2 wives, or maybe he had a concubine. We really don't know. From there, we get to the next verse 11. The sons of Levi, of Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Then verse 12, the sons of Judah, Onan, Shelah, Perez, Zerah. But and Onan died in the land of Canaan, and the sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. Now, what's interesting about this group is you'll notice, again, the sons of Levi has 3. Judah has 5, but this backs up again the Genesis story in that he tells about and Onan. You remember Judah and Tamar have to deal with this encounter. You remember Tamar is the mother, Perez and Zerah, who were Tamar was the wife of and Onan, or Onan. You remember she was married to him. He wasn't able to produce a child. Then the brother died. Judah promised her that she could marry Shelah. When Shelah got old enough, he skipped her over. So Tamar put on those clothes and tricked Judah into sleeping with her, and she gave birth to 2 children. Those 2 children are Perez and Zerah. So this is part of that lineage. And then you notice in the last part of this, we see some of the sons of the sons. The sons of, even beyond that, this is some great-grandsons that were mentioned. because these are the sons of Perez, of Hezron and Hamul. They were the grandsons of Judah, great-grandsons of Jacob. So we see this group. Now, the next group we see here, next list is Issachar. Issachar has the sons of Issachar are Tola, Puvah, Yov, and Shimron. The sons of Zebulon were Sarid, Elon, and Jahaleel. These are the sons of Leah, whom she bore to Jacob in Padan Aram, together with his daughter Dinah. Altogether, his sons and his daughters numbered 33. So again, you notice again, verse 13, Issachar, we're listed his 4 sons. Verse 14, Zebulun has 3 sons. And then verse 15, we're told how we're going to look at the divisions of here. It's very interesting. First group, we're not told till the end of these kids, how they're divided up. But we're going to notice from here on out, this is told at the beginning. Notice, these are the sons of Leah, the one that he got first. And again, notice, together with his daughter Dinah. So you remember Leah, although she wasn't his necessarily preferred favorite wife, she was one who gave him the most sons and even the daughter. But again, you notice the end of verse 15, it uses that plural, his sons and his daughters. And so the idea there, the question is that his daughters refer to Dinah in a plural way of equaling sons, or is this talking about the sons-in-law? Now, there is an interesting thought, interesting question about this, the end of this verse, and that is that his sons and daughters numbered 33. Well, there's actually more than 33 listed here because the question becomes, this 33 that we're going to see later is used to make the 70 that Jacob Hall takes with him. If we look at them, the way they're listed, they list and Onan in that list. And we know that we're told here that and Onan are actually no longer alive at this point. But what most people think probably is what referring to here is not and Onan, but that this 33 includes Jacob himself and Dinah. Now, the other thing about this list is you'll notice that not a one of this list mentions any of these sons' wives. There's not a mention of any of these sons having a wife at this point. Again, the implication is they had wives because they have children. They may have been like their father and had multiple wives. We don't know, or concubines. We don't know. But the wives are not mentioned here. They're not told to us. And we'll get to that a little later as we look at this. But the 33 here probably referred to Jacob, Dinah, and the other sons that are listed here, save and Onan, the ones who had died in the land of Canaan. And so we go from there to go to the next group, the sons of Gad. Notice the sons of Gad, I told you wrong a minute ago, we're told at the end of these sections whose sons they are. I forgot the order when I told you that. Sons of Gad are Ziphion, Haggi, Shuni, Esbon, Ari, Oradi, and Areli. The sons of Asher, Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, Berah, with Sarah their sister. And the sons of Berah were Heber and Machiel. These are the sons of Zilpah, whom Laban gave to Leah his daughter, and these she bore to Jacob 16 persons. So again, we look at this list, we can take this list and adds up all these names that are given here, and they add up to 16. So here's Jacob's breakdown. You sort of see Jacob's family with his first wife, with his wife, his first wife, Leah. He has 33. The second concubine he has, by the time all this is transpired, has 16 people in their family. We go from there to see the next one, the sons of Rachel, Jacob's wife. Now, here's an interesting thing before we get into these two, is to notice that Rachel is the only one who's called Jacob's wife. If you look ahead, and just bear with me a minute, look ahead at this, you'll notice down here, these are the sons of Bilhah, whom gave Rachel. We'll talk about those in just a minute. You go back over here to Zilpah. We're told that she's the one that Laban gave to Leah. Then we go back to Leah. She's again just said, these are the sons of Leah, whom she bore Jacob in Padan Aram. Rachel is the only one who's called his wife. Again, I don't know why he does that, other than the writer to show Leah's special place, her special position in this family that she holds here. And so we see Jacob or Rachel, Jacob's wife, bore Joseph and Benjamin, their two sons. Verse 20, into Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, bore to him. And the sons of Benjamin, Bala, Becher, Ashbel, Gerar, Naaman, Ehi, Rosh, Mupim, Hufim, and Arad. These are the sons of Rachel, who were born to Jacob, 14 persons in all. So this is very interesting, an interesting part to me, because one, we see Joseph. Again, we're told Joseph and his two sons. Of all these sons, this is the only one we're really told outside of this narrative about his children, save for a little bit of Judah. Him and Judah are the only two we know about. Let me rephrase that. But verse 21 is interesting to me. Let me check my number again. Yeah, it is Benjamin. I had to make sure I got my number right. It is from my reading of this and my studying this, Benjamin, although he's the youngest and only in his 30s, and the youngest son of this group, is listed as having 10 children. He has 10 children listed to him, and some people will wonder, have asked, whether or not he had all these sons before he went to Egypt, or some of these were born in Egypt. I seem to think that he had these before he went to Egypt. It will make sense to be listed in his group because there were ones that were born before he went and born in the land of Canaan. Then you notice verse 22, these are the sons of Rachel who were born to Jacob, 14 persons in all. So again, we see 14 listed here. But again, remember, there are 3 of these that are already in Egypt. And we'll see that in just, I make that emphasis for what we're going to see in just a minute. From there, we get to verse 23 through verse 25. The son of Dan, Hushim, the sons of Naphtali, Jaziel, Guni, Jazer, and Shalim. These are the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave Rachel his daughter, and these she bore to Jacob, 7 persons in all. So what's interesting about this, and the translation I have doesn't show this, but some translations in verse 23 where it says the son of Dan, mine says the son of Dan on screen. Some translations actually have the sons of Dan, which was the Hebrew word. And I say that to go back to what we talked about with the daughters of Jacob, is that sometimes that plural is used even when there's one, to keep that in mind about the same, to keep the same idea, or keep it parallel with each other. So here's the sons of Bilhah. And these are the 7 that she bore from the 2 sons she bore Jacob, and these are the descendants. So now we get to verse 26. All the persons belonging to Jacob came down to Egypt, who were his own descendants, not including Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. So again, here we have this idea of how many people were with Jacob. But again, you'll notice that in verse 27, the sons of Jacob, or sons of Joseph, who were born to him in Egypt, were 2. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. So we get in verse 26, and this is something that some people will say, well, which is the right number? Verse 26 says there's 66. Verse 27 says there's 70. So which number is the right number? What it is verse 27 includes Joseph and his family in the counting, rather than the first ones. And it also, some people think it includes the idea of Jacob himself. The earlier number in verse 26, the 66, includes everybody but Jacob. Because you notice he says, these are all the persons belonging to Jacob, not necessarily Jacob. And again, you take those numbers, you add them together, you can see this work out. And so here we have Jacob coming into Egypt with 70. Now, what's interesting about this is that he doesn't include the wives, and there's probably a reason for that. The reason for that would be 70. Because the number 70 in biblical literature is very important. You get the number 70 by using 2 forms, or two numbers that have a meaning to them. To get 70, you have 7 times 10. 10 in the Hebrew thought, in the Hebrew language, the Hebrew writings, 10 means complete, whole, is brought to a close. 7 is perfect. 7 is the idea of perfection. There's 7 days in creation. There's a bunch of 7s in the Bibles. There's a bunch of 10s in the Bible. Well, that's the reason why. Those numbers have significance in the Hebrew understanding. So this is probably why the wives weren't included, so they'd have this round number that the writer would include to say there are 70 men here, 70 people in this family, not counting certain people, to show this was a complete. This was the seed, if you will, of what God is about to do with Jacob and his family, how he's going to grow into a nation. And what's interesting is that God takes 70 people who are moved from one land to another, and in 4 centuries, a little bit over 400 years, he's going to take these 70 people and turn them into over 600,000 men. When the Israelites leave Egypt, we're going to see a number of 600 and something thousand men leave, not women and children, but just men that are over the age of 20. And so God is going to do some remarkable things, even though it's 400 years. This is a big growth spurt of what he's about to happen, of how God's going to get Jacob. And this is all going to be a promise that God gave Jacob, that I took you down there, I'm going to bring you back out, and I'll remember you. We get from here to the last little bit, verse 28. Verse 28, he has sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen, and they came into the land of Goshen. Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Here we have the beautiful verses, the reunion we've been waiting on. Jacob has finally arrived in Egypt. And as he arrives, verse 28, we see this very interesting encounter. Well, I told you few weeks ago, we're going to see one of the sons besides Joseph sort of step into the spotlight. We see that son step forward again, in that of all the ones Jacob could have sent ahead of him, he sent Judah. Again, Judah is the one who is taking that place of being the family leader, taking that place, being a key part of that family. We're going to see that in the next few chapters. I believe it's chapter 48 or 49, when Jacob blesses his sons, he's going to give their scepter, the power, the throne to Judah. And we see that beginning even with Joseph and the brothers earlier, to now Judah again. Remember, Judah's the one who said he would honor himself to keep Benjamin. Judah's the one who begs Joseph to let Benjamin go and even offers to take his place. Now Judah's the one who told him to go down to Egypt to see Joseph. Now Judah again is sent to show them the way. They send Judah ahead to go because he knows where Joseph lives, know where Joseph's at, to come back and show them how to get into the land of Goshen. And then when Judah comes and tells Joseph they're here and they didn't know how to get there, verse 29, Joseph prepares his chariot and goes out to meet his father in Goshen. And some have said that the way these words are in Hebrew is that he prepared his chariot and went quickly. He was in a quick manner. He didn't waste time going to Jacob because he's so ready to see his father. And then you notice again, he presents himself to him. He falls on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. So here you have this emotional reunion of Jacob, very similar to Benjamin and Joseph. Remember we talked about Joseph falling on Benjamin's neck, and they said we're told that Joseph is the only one, or Benjamin's the only one who wept with Joseph. Here we see Joseph falling on his father. We can just imagine the emotions that were present in that situation. This is just an idea of the map again of where they're going. This is going to be from later, the lines, but you'll notice, again, I just want to remind you where everything is, where they would have left. Here is Beersheba. Jacob and his family would actually have started somewhere around here in Hebron, and they would have marched down to Beersheba. The other thing about Beersheba is this area right here, again, is called wilderness. This is a place where you don't take children, you don't take older people, but here they took this family to get here, and they come to the land of Ramesses, or the land of Goshen. Later, it's going to be called Ramesses in Exodus. What this is, you'll notice all these tributaries coming out of here. All these, this is the delta. You know, we talk about the delta. We have a few hours from us. This is the delta of Egypt. The problem with this area of the delta was it wasn't very good farmland, but it was great land for shepherds. And so this is why Joseph tells his family, you're going to be in the land of Goshen, because he knows this isn't farmland. He knows his parents or his family can be here. They can have their flocks. There's no fear of the flocks interfering with any of the crops of Egypt, any of that causing any trouble. So that's what we see here in this land. And then we go from there. Let's see if we can get this to go on forward. Again, this is just a little bit more of a zoomed in view of that to show you where they went, how they traveled around there. All right. Now we get the last few verses of this chapter, and then we'll be through for tonight, I promise. Verse 30, Israel said to Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive. It's very interesting that Jacob finally sees Joseph, and his response is, now I can die. The idea is that now I can die in peace. I can die in peace because I finally got to see my son that I lost. The son that I thought was gone forever is now back. I'm now reunited with him. Now I can die in peace. And remember, it's very interesting. This was the promise God gave him. God gave him the promise that you're going to go down into this land, and and Joseph is going to be there when you die. Joseph is going to be there to close your eyes. Now, the other interesting thing about this that's sort of ironic is that Jacob says, I'm ready to die. But when we look at the Bible record and look at the Bible timeline, Jacob actually lives for 17 years in Egypt. Jacob nearly gets back the time he lost with Joseph. If you look at his time of Joseph being in prison, Joseph coming to power to calling his family down, it's about around 20 years. Again, we don't know precisely because we don't know all the little details, but it's close to 20 years. And here we see after this, Jacob lives for 17 more years. So Jacob is going to get that time back that he lost with his son. But Jacob's finally ready to die. I wonder how his other brothers must have felt to know that when he saw his other brother, he says, I can die now. I wonder how they must have felt knowing what all they had in that interaction and caused that to happen. But then we notice verse 31, Joseph comes to his brothers. In the last few verses, we're going to see Joseph is going to set his brothers up for the future. Tell them what to say. Verse 31, Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and will say to him, my brothers of my father's household who are in the land of Canaan have come to me. And the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now. Both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. Now, Joseph is coaching his brothers in what to say. He says, one, I want you to come and tell them you're a shepherd. There are a few reasons that people think they did this. So one is that Joseph wants Pharaoh to realize these are not moochers coming in. That he didn't bring people in who were going to live off the government, going to live off Pharaoh, live off of Egypt. He wants them to know these are workers and that they're shepherds. And again, he wants them to tell them they're shepherds so Pharaoh can say, you'll dwell in the land of Goshen. You'll dwell in that land where we can't grow anything. You can dwell in that land that's separated from Egypt a little bit. and that you won't cause any problems. Now, again, it's interesting. They talk about the shepherd as an abomination to the Egyptians, is that we really have no reasoning for this other than there was a time, there was a group called the Hassics who lived near Canaan at this time, and they went into Egypt sometime. They were shepherds, and they were sort of had a rivalry going on with Egypt. They caused Egypt a lot of problems. So some people think that may have been why the Egyptians were looked down on shepherds. Now, I say this is sort of odd because we're going to see later, Pharaoh's actually going to tell Jacob, if you've got some trustworthy sons, some trustworthy men, I want you to watch my flock. So Pharaoh has a flock that he keeps himself. Another thing that people think maybe the reason why the Egyptians hated the shepherds is one, the Hassics, but two, some of the animals or some of the gods the Egyptians worship were connected to animals that were typically shepherded, but they were typically animals that the shepherds would eat and fix for their meals. And so some people think that the Egyptians may not have thought too highly of that, in that these shepherds would slaughter the animals they consider to be sacred. But either way, Joseph tells his brothers, you tell him you're shepherds, you've always been shepherds, you always want to be a shepherd. And he says, if you tell him that, then he's going to give you the land of Goshen. And you're going to be able to live here in peace. And everything's going to go as you want it to go. And so this brings chapter 46 to a close. Next week, chapter 47, we're going to see Jacob as he goes into Egypt. We're going to see what Jacob does. Jacob's going to go to Pharaoh. It's very interesting what Jacob tells Pharaoh. We'll talk about that as we get there next week. And we're going to see Jacob get set up. Then we're going to see in the coming weeks, Jacob's going to bless Joseph's sons. Then Jacob's going to give the blessings for all of his sons. Well, that's chapter 49. 48 is where he blesses Ephraim and Manasseh. And then finally in Genesis 50, we're going to see Jacob's death and the ending of this book. So we're about 3 or 4 weeks from finishing up the book of Genesis. That's really all that I have for tonight. Appreciate everyone being with us. I know we're a few minutes after what we usually try to shoot for, but we're still not too late. So I'm going to stop the live stream. I'm going to allow people who are here to talk or say bye for a minute. But for the rest of you, appreciate you being here. Remember Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, we'll have our worship service. Brother Joe Williams will be speaking for us. I look forward to that. We'll have our live stream as we usually do. Again, we hope everyone's having a good week, and we hope to see you all Sunday, and hope to see you all next